on, well, a really wet and miserable 3rd of November. 2 more days till the fireworks start. Well, somebody was saying to me the other day that the fireworks had already started, and there have been some rumours, and I think it's fair to say they're just rumours at the moment, that there have been reasons why things have suddenly changed. Now, the things I'm talking about are Craig Murray, the former British diplomat and Scottish independence advocate, who has recently announced that he has joined Jeremy Corbyn's party, the so-called Your Party. Now, this caused a great deal of, I think, anxiety. People didn't understand why Craig would do this, why he would move from advocating for Scottish independence to joining what is effectively, at least at the moment, an English party run by his former friend, Jeremy Corbyn. Now, my understanding is, and this is from people within the Labour Party, that Jeremy Corbyn and Craig Murray are old friends. They have quite a close personal relationship. They get on well. They both share the same basic socialist fundamental views. So it's not really that surprising that Craig would choose to join Jeremy's party. Now, before you all start rushing off and saying, but he's abandoning Scotland and going with an English party, remember that Craig Murray has been a member of various parties throughout his illustrious career, both as a commentator, as a basically, you name it, Craig Murray's been it. But I mean, having gone from being a British ambassador and working within the UK government to then advocating for Scottish independence is a huge step. But he has been a member of other socialist-leaning parties, and he has joined these parties really, as far as I can make out, with a view to putting himself forward as a candidate, for a general election, either the UK Parliament or the Scottish Parliament. Now, either way, unfortunately for Craig, his previous conviction for daring to publish both sides of the argument in Alex Salmond's court case, and remember, he was only guilty of publishing the truth, publishing the Salmond side of this, was effectively a kangaroo court, in which Mr. Salmond was on his own defending his own reputation and himself from allegations of inappropriate sexual behaviour towards women. Now, he was acquitted on all charges by a jury which was predominantly made up of women, and the judge for this particular court case was also a woman. So for Mr. Salmond to be exonerated, well, that speaks for itself. Now, Craig had been publishing various articles during that time where he basically revealed in part, and it's not fair to say that he named the names of the women concerned who were making these allegations, but apparently allowed it to be possible if you were really, diligent and searched through everything and put all of the little pieces together, you might be able to identify who these people were. But because of it, he was found guilty of contempt of court, and he was jailed, I think, if I remember correctly, for 8 months. So he has a prison record. Now, if you have a conviction, a criminal conviction for anything at all, that actually precludes you from being elected, and many parties will just simply not allow you to stand for election. And this is what Craig Murray claims happened to him when he was in Alba, that he was not selected as a candidate for any post because he had a criminal conviction. Now, it may well be that the rules that Alba were trying to obey were in force at the time, and he couldn't allow him to be a candidate. Either way, he's now joined Mr. Corbyn's party. Now, I've canvassed for opinions on this, and I even asked Craig directly in an X post why he decided to join your party. What was his motivation? What was he hoping to achieve? So far, I haven't had a reply from Mr. Murray. However, I did get an interesting comment from someone else who suggested, I think it's just a suggestion at the moment, that his reason for moving to reform, sorry, not to reform, his reason for moving to your party might be to reform it before it actually becomes an official party with official policies. In other words, the claim is, or the suggestion was, that he might have moved because he wants to influence Jeremy Corbyn's party in a way where it is listed as a federal party rather than one which is based in England. Now, this may or may not be true. I can't tell at the moment because nobody's talking about it, least of all Craig Murray himself. But it's a mystery, I have to say, and it has caused some anxiety. But I think we should be careful about jumping to conclusions about Craig Murray. I personally don't believe that he's a plant of any kind. I think he shares a lot of political views and standards with Jeremy Corbyn. He has done for years. I don't think he's made any secret of the fact. The fact that he is advocating for Scottish and Irish and Welsh independence, I think, is to his credit. If he were a plant, as somebody pointed out in a recent private comment, why would he risk his entire career in Scotland particularly, or anywhere else for that matter, to reveal the details of Alex Salmond's defence case, which got him into jail, basically? Why would you risk your reputation in jail time if you were a British plant? And that's an interesting and powerful argument against this theory that he might be some kind of Trojan horse. Frankly, I don't believe it. I think this is just something he's decided to do because he knows Jeremy Corbyn and he wants to change the way your party is set up, so it becomes a federal party. In other words, it represents all the four, I suppose, nations of these islands, including the northern part of Ireland. Anyway, to move on, there's also a rumour, and it is a rumour only, that there is some sort of friction developing within SALVO Liberation Scotland. Now, kind of lumping these two things together, campaigning arm is SALVO, the sort of party political element is Liberation Scotland. That there is some kind of internal friction between the main figures. I think you'd have to say that the most well-known figures within SALVO Liberation Scotland. So far, and I've dug around a fair old bit, I haven't found anybody who's aware of these so-called frictions or anything within this organisation which would show any kind of infighting at all. Now, it's perfectly possible there might be some kind of professional jealousy if one person is getting more airtime than another, but frankly, I don't see any evidence of any of this. It looks to me like a bit of a storm in a teacup. The problem for all of us here in Scotland at the moment, those of us who are in favour of independence, is we are all super paranoid at the moment about everyone and everything, because there have been attempts to undermine the campaigning for independence from the inside before, and I think we know who that was. However, I don't think it's happening here. For the ending part of this programme, I wanted to finish on a story which is nothing really to do with us that much, but I was watching Professor Richard Murphy's most recent podcast on X, and he was exploring the possibility that the United Kingdom might break up. Now, what he suggested is that the forces within the various component parts of the UK are all pulling in different directions, including England. Scotland is already showing basically a majority for leaving the Union. It's been in the polls for months that we had been at or above the 50% mark for a long, long time, and it's gradually increasing. The other thing he pointed to as well was that Plaid Cymru, if its recent by-election success is anything to go by, may well take power in Wales, with the opposition being formed by Reform, simply because the polling in Wales shows that Plaid and Reform are the only two major parties slugging it out, and Plaid at the moment has a convincing lead. And if that were carried forward into an election in Wales, Plaid Cymru might end up being the party of government in Wales, which opens an interesting possibility, because if Scotland and Wales both have pro-independence governments, then there's a good chance that they could work together to campaign for independence. Now, at the same time as this is going on, many people in the more far-flung corners, shall we say, of England are also deeply unhappy at the way the UK is being run from London, because places in the northeast of England, the northwest of England, the Midlands, the far west of England, and also in East Anglia, rural East Anglia, are complaining that they are getting table crumbs, while the southeast corner of England seems to be getting all the funding from whatever government happens to be in power in Westminster at the time. So there's a great deal of unhappiness at the way the UK is being run from the top down. And it appears that both the Tory party before them and the Labour Party now believe that they are entitled to rule from the centre, and that we have to just take what is handed down. Now, if, and this is a big if incidentally, if there was a powerful coalition between the Scottish Government, the Welsh Government, and perhaps even the Northern Irish Assembly, in which they all together campaign for, at the very least, a federal United Kingdom. Now, that would be far less than being independent. Richard Murphy, in his podcast, was proposing that at the very least, and this is without independence, that the UK should be a federal state, each individual nation governing itself, each individual nation having all of its taxation to enable it to function properly, which at the moment, of course, we don't have, because we send approximately 40% of all of our taxation to Westminster. And we certainly don't get that 40% back. And I dare say Wales is just as bad or worse. I have no idea what the fraction is like in Northern Ireland, but I'd be willing to bet you it's showered with funds to try and keep it stabilised as a British territory, even though it's only 6 counties. So the unrest is there. It remains to be seen whether next year, 2026, provides both a Plaid majority at the Senate in Wales, as well as a Scottish majority at Holyrood. Because if that happens, then we have a very nice alignment of circumstances where Wales and Scotland can work together as a federation. You could call it the Celtic Federation, if you like, to put pressure on London to either federate, in other words, to separate the countries out into individual nations who fund themselves through their own taxation and their own wealth generation, but have a loose federation where things like, for example, defence or the environment or climate change, these big ticket issues are, let me say, shared with common types of policies between the 4 different parts. It's an interesting idea, not sure it would work, and I certainly don't think it would satisfy people in the independence movement, because having independence means you get to take all the decisions, not just the ones you're allowed to take by some kind of federal government. So I think the federal argument is pretty weak halfway house, and it would result in us having a 2-tier system as we have now, instead of a single tier of government for each individual nation, which is far more efficient. Not only that, but obviously it gives full control to each individual parliament, and that is really what should happen. And then those individual nations, if they wish, can negotiate things like free trade, free movement of people, of finance, of goods and services, just like we had before we left the European Union. It also, incidentally, would allow us, as an independent state, to renegotiate some kind of trade deal with the European Union that was to our advantage, but perhaps less than full EU membership. All of these things, of course, become possible when you are independent. But I think the arguments now for the Union finally falling apart are getting stronger. Richard Murphy was very emphatic in reminding us all that actually England is in the same kind of state, because it's centrally run. London in the southeast gets all the funding, and the more distant you are from the centre government in England, the lower your funding gets, and the worse your situation becomes. There are fewer jobs, there's less investment, fewer industries, etc., etc. So there are strong reasons why English people as well would demand their country back as well, and to have it governed in a way where all of the regions of England get at least funding that's equivalent to each other, depending on the numbers of people who live there. If that did happen, and it's a huge if, whichever party was brave enough to announce it in Westminster would probably be in power for a very long time, because they're going to please the vast majority of people in England. In Scotland, in Wales, we have our own parliaments, and if they have all their tax raising powers and they have all of the tax available to them and all the power to use it any way they like, then there's no reason for any of us to be beholden to England for anything that we do. And that's exactly the way it should be. Somebody said, it might even have been Richard Murphy, that the other countries of the UK other than England deserve to be independent. Now, I sort of take issue with that. I think we have a right to be independent. We don't have to deserve it. We don't have to do something good to make us worthy of it. We're all entitled to live in a country that's independent. It's a natural state for every nation. So it's not a case of being entitled or earning the right. It's a case of having the right conferred upon you as an independent state. And that can only be done if the United Kingdom breaks up. Not in an unruly mess, but in a coordinated way, so that the four nations, and this, I'll include the 6 counties of Northern Ireland for the sake of convenience here, but the four component parts of the UK all get to contribute in some kind of federated arrangement where the four independent nations can trade, travel, do business with each other, travel freely, etc. All of which can easily be done and would actually strengthen England, because England would have the opportunity to do things differently as well. Anyway, that's about it for my little bit of encouragement for the UK to break up. I hope you enjoy the day and the rest of your week. I will be back on Friday morning at 9:30 with Norrie Hunter in the latest edition of Hodma Jacob, and you could probably look forward to some outrageous things being said and all kinds of views being expressed on that program as usual, and that is our hallmark. We like to discuss things freely. Nobody has any filters. We can say and do as we please on that program, and I would encourage you to watch it and take part if you can. Friday 9:30 for Hodma Jacob. In the meantime, that's it from Inde-Car just now. Hopefully I may have time to do another program later in the week. If so, I'll see you then. But that's it from Inde-Car today. As I always say, keep the faith. I'll see you next time on Inde-Car. Bye for now.